Hello everybody and welcome back to another Star Wars Legion report card video. Today we're going to be talking about the CIS and their Special Forces options. Once again, this is how I rank the unit, so feel free to stop at either one of these and check out how I do it. So first up we have the BX Strike Team coming in at 20 points. You have to take a heavy weapon, meaning you have to take the Dioxis Mine or the Sniper Rifle available to the Droid Commandos. We'll check those out in a minute, but let's look at everything else on the card. They have AI Dodge Move, Impervious, Scale, Scout 3, and Sharpshooter 1. 2 models apiece pretty much. 1 health apiece, red defense dice, 2 courage. They do surge to hit. 1 black dice in melee, and 2 white at range 1 to 3. Pros, these guys have an efficient sniper shot. We'll look at that sniper once again in a second, but it is essentially a 2 red sniper that has some special things to it. So let's go ahead and pop that up real quick because I want to talk about it. But it is a range 1 to 5 sniper, it's got lethal 1, and it's immune to deflect. It has the same problem the ARC Troopers have though, in that dodges can really run your day. On the other hand though, unlike the ARC Troopers, they really don't need a bunch of tokens or things like that to make that efficient, but there is a problem which we'll talk about in a second. They do surge to hit, and that's easily the best thing. On top of 2 red dice, you're going to be seeing a lot of 1 past cover with Sharpshooter 1. On top of that, they've got Impervious, so being in a sniper ward, they can survive a lot longer than most units and can just maybe sometimes survive things they're not supposed to with a high variant on their defense. Courage is also not a problem for them whatsoever. They're always going to mostly get those 2 actions because you're going to need pretty much 4 suppression on them to even worry about it. They also have Scout Scale. Once again, Scale's not that great, but Scout 3 and Scale combined really allow them to get in some unique places to maybe get some vantage points and maybe even some out-of-cover shots. I know, crazy to think about, but it does give them some mobility on top of their efficient dice pool. Cons, easily the worst thing about them is AI. Much like B1s and all these other droid units we talk about, you usually don't want a bunch of tokens in your bag as a CIS player. That's your main privilege of playing droids, is that you don't have to worry about that. But once you start putting tokens in your bag, you may have key pieces like Asajj, Dooku, Force User, Bounty Hunter, whoever it is, that you may be struggling to get when you want them because you maybe brought 3 units of BX series droids. 3 snipers, pretty common thing for some people. And in this case, it feels like a sore thumb. Now, there are ways to negate this, there are ways to help, but the biggest thing is that you are AI dodging or moving with them. So if they are not getting orders, that aim and shoot action that makes them a very efficient dice pool can take away a lot from that efficiency. One of the best ways you can get around this, though, is number 1, give them orders. That's not easy when there's 3 of them, or more than 1 of them, rather. On top of that, though, you could do something like Kraken and ignore that AI for suppression, and then you can aim and shoot with them as much as you please. Still kind of screws up your order control, but maybe worth it. And I've seen some people play it, and it's actually pretty interesting. So if you do want to run 3 sniper teams, someone like Kraken's going to allow you to negate that big negative of them. So dodges really doesn't do a ton for them, and like I said, they just kind of feel super needy, much like the ARC Troopers. I do feel like, while not as drastic of a problem, they still have that problem of, oh, I really need a specific commander or specific order control to make 3 of us work or make enough of us work. Having 1 of them, though, is perfectly fine. So I think they're about a C-. I don't think they're anything special, and unfortunately, I just think those 2 other factions really, Galactic Civil War factions, really just kind of outclass them in the Sniper War, but still a solid unit, and you should definitely give them a run. The full Commando teams, on the other hand, coming in at 68 points. They've got literally everything is exactly the same, but they do start off at 4 models apiece. They've got 1 health a pop and 2 courage each. Once again, red defense dice, and they surge to hit. Now we're talking a little more dice in terms of that range 1 to 3 shot, and using this more as an elite unit that is getting up and utilizing that Scout 3, that Impervious, that Dodge, AI, or Move, a lot more. So pretty much all the same good things are on this card, right? We've got Sharp 1, we surge to hit, our courage is pretty freaking amazing, we've got Impervious, and we're going to look at some cool upgrades on this next slide that really make these units a little more unique. Cons, super swingy dice pool, 2 white dice, surge to hit is not a bad dice pool, don't get me wrong, it just will fail you. That's all you need to know. You're going to aim, you're going to shoot with it, and you're going to look at your dice, and you're going to say, well, there's 3 hits. and you're going to be a little disappointed sometimes. On the other hand, you could also surprise yourself because that is still a lot of dice coming at your opponent. Like, let's say you're running the sniper, you've got, 8 white dice, 2 red, sharp 1, pierce 1 even, maybe with an aim, all those things. But once again, the problem is AI. If you're not giving them orders, they're going to be dodging or moving, meaning you're not getting that aim or using lethal or increasing the consistency of this dice pool. So it's either going to be really bad or really good for you, but AI really does affect these units, and most importantly, it affects your order control. So even though they have an elite cost, for me, they sometimes don't feel like an elite unit, and I also feel like they're kind of just outclassed by another unit in this faction that we're about to talk about for a very similar cost and sometimes cheaper. But let's look at these upgrades. Once again, there's the sniper for you. It's 30 points. You can put it on either group, and I think it's completely good on either group. I think you can 100% justify throwing a sniper on a full unit of commandos, so I do think that is something unique about the Republic and CIS variants of these guys, is doing a full strike team, or not strike team, but doing a full scout trooper team with a sniper or full commando team with a sniper isn't necessarily bad. It's just I think they fit a little bit better in the commando droids. Doxus Mind Saboteur, I would argue that this is one of the better minds in the game, just because poison is such a unique keyword and it doesn't affect this unit. So you can maybe somewhat justify actually hitting yourself with a mine, especially if you're running something like deflector shields. But let's talk about this mine some more. Detonate 1, blast, poison 1. The poison essentially is if they take it, they have to lose a model at the end of their activation. And it's a super cool, unique feature, guaranteeing you some wounds, and they surge to hit. So this can be really devastating, especially if you throw this into a big blob of troopers. Organics are going to suffer. Droids, on the other hand, don't got to worry about it. So very cool and unique for them, and I think it really fits. So probably the best saboteur in the game, in my opinion. Well, one of the best, rather. I don't think any of them are particularly amazing, but I think this has a unique feature where, oh, you're a droid, you don't have to worry about this poison thing. Your opponent, on the other hand, probably will. So I do like that combo, and I think it fits them. So if you don't want to spend, the 2 extra points for the sniper, I think this saboteur is just fine. Deflector shields, you just get shielded 2. When you recover, flip 2 inactive shield tokens. Makes them super tanky, a lot harder to kill. Once again, we're talking about a 1 health per model unit, so same problem with the ARC troopers. Oh no, I lost a model, my dice pool just got a little bit worse, and now it's a lot worse. So deflector shields will give you some time to take some hits, rather, and keep that dice pool healthy for a little bit longer, but 18 points is quite the asking price for this, in my opinion, but it's still solid. Vibro swords, super unique upgrade, in my opinion, and also really cheap. You just get charge, which is very nice and gives that unit extreme flexibility in terms of what it is trying to do. A red and a white in melee, especially if you have a 5-man squad, talking 5 red, 5 white. It's just a nice little dark trooper punch, but we only get to do it once, so don't feel too bad about it. But it's still a really good thing, especially on top of Scale and the Scout 3. You can really enjoy some games with commando droids when you have that versatility of shooting, charging, all that stuff. So, very unique upgrade. I don't know how many units the BX droids necessarily want to be in melee with, but it does make them a very solid melee choice against a lot of units that don't want to be in melee, if that makes sense. Because these are 1 HP models, Wookiees, Magmas, IRG are probably going to win that fight, but if we're talking, clone troopers, stuff like that, maybe we can start having that discussion of you just got more dice than they do, so you can probably win that melee fight. Still a very unique upgrade, gives them a ton of versatility when you put it on there, and it's relatively cheap, so you usually don't feel too bad for it if you don't use it in a game, per se. Then you have the Magnas. These guys were probably once the best unit in this faction, and they are still very good. I would even understand if you still consider them an A. I just think what made them good got a bit of a points increase. So let's analyze them a little bit further, though. They come in at 72 points a pop with a dodge and a move for the AI action, same as the commandos. They can charge. They've got Guardian 2 for commanders only, immune to melee pierce natively. They also have retinue, giving them a aim or a dodge as long as they're at range 1 to 2 of a friendly commander. They also have an unhindered that's super solid as well. Red defense dice, 2 HP a pop, 2 courage, surge to hit, 2 black in melee, and a black and a white at range 1 to 2. Pros, these guys have token generation. With Retinue, that's just a super great thing to have. You can really justify bringing things like situational awareness and just taking the dodge at the beginning of every turn, and yeah, don't worry about crits. So that's very solid. Commander synergy is 100% there. It's all over the card. It's like the game's trying to tell you to play these with commanders, and honestly, you really don't have to. Range 2 shot is also very devastating, especially when you put certain upgrades on here, like the RPG. 3 black and 3 white on top of an upgrades. Dice pool is no joke, especially when you search to hit, and maybe you even have an aim from something like Retinue. So, very solid, versatile shot on top of a melee unit. Unhindered will come into play way more times than you think it will. It is very solid to have on their card and helps them navigate the battlefield faster than most. They are a fantastic melee unit. Surging to hit is great. The 2 black dice is solid. The 2 health is solid. And the droid faction in particular is probably the most common one to put something like aggressive tactics on. So Magna Guards, having 1 surge in melee, that's just good. It's going to make them much tougher to kill and much harder than most melee units to shift off the board, even when we're talking about things like big force users or just other hard-hitting melee units. Magna Guards are going to be sticking around and fighting the good fight. Cons, on the other hand, RPG is super pricey now. It's definitely what made them probably an A+ unit before this last errata, but they are still really good, and it's probably really still worth it. Less reasonable with no upgrades. That's the other thing, is a lot of those upgrades, like situational awareness, got a little bit of a points increase, so these guys are starting to get very expensive. They also want to be next to commanders, and with things like Asajj and Maul existing in this faction, it's not like you can't bring Magnus. You can definitely just keep them in range 1 to 2 of a T-series. That's usually what I do, and just use them as a range 4 unit. And backliner, and Asajj and Maul can go do what they want to, but they do seem to benefit a little bit more if they're running with someone like Dooku to keep him alive and healthy. Like I said, there's still a lot of value in this, but for the most part, they want to be next to commanders, and it kind of feels bad when you go charge something and you don't get your token. So definitely not the end of the world, though. It's just that's what they synergize with, and it is kind of written on the wall. Let's look at their upgrades, though. The Electro Whip Magna Guard, probably rising closer to the top of your selections here. The range 1 is very unique, 2 red and melee as well, immobilize. It's a very solid keyword. Giving them immobilized tokens, especially at range 1 if you can, something like Yoda or Palp or even Vader and that stuff, it's very good. Versatile, can also do what's engaged, so that makes them, once again, versatile in what they can attack and what they can't attack, really giving you some options to mess up your opponent's decision making, objective play, charge range, all of that stuff. You get a ton of value from the whip. Unfortunately, you do have to wound them, so sometimes they can just block 2 and you don't get anything. We're also talking about if you're doing this at range 1, and let's say you're using the versatile keyword, maybe they're in cover, and then you're probably not getting anything, right? So a little bit deceptive, but just those 2 red in melee is a very solid increase to your melee dice pool. On top of things like tenacity, you're probably getting that immobilize off, but if you're in melee in the first place, maybe not that great in terms of giving them an immobilize token. Maybe prevent some force users or melee units from disengaging or leaving to go charge something else. So not saying it's bad, but its value can be a little tricky in terms of the situation you're in with the Magna Guards. For 22 points, you can just have another one. This is really solid, a cheap upgrade. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. This is just your average Joe upgrade. Can't go wrong with it, can't go right with it. The OG, the legend himself, the RPS-6 Magna Guard, the red, black, white with critical 1 and impact 2. The keywords are still there, and it is still really strong, especially when we got things like Dark Troopers running around. This is a very solid upgrade. This really adds on to that idea of that range 2 shot as well. Getting an aim moving up to range 2 with critical 1, impact 2, and a red, black, white on top of your 3 black and 3 white. That is a great dice pool. The other great thing about this, it's not cumbersome. You can sit the Magna Guards and pretend they're a sniper for half the game and just take aim, shoot at range 4 and just try to roll for the critical and then maybe reroll and get another crit. Who knows? So it's actually a really solid upgrade, a great backlining unit, or a great upgrade for a backline unit because you can just sit back there and maybe get a couple wounds on different models or armor or whatever else you need. So honestly, this is the upgrade I would take. I know it's 34 points. That's definitely why they got knocked down to a B for me. Because if you are taking this, maybe bringing situational or tenacity, this unit starts to get really expensive and you start reaching, 40, 30 points off of just getting another force user. So, not saying they're not invalid, but they definitely got hit with the points. So you do need to justify bringing them and definitely consider making sure they actually have a role in your army. But great unit. I love the Magna Guards. They're probably one of my favorite units in the game, favorite models. So RPS, probably one of my favorite upgrades as well. I love these guys. Unfortunately, they are a little expensive now, but still a great upgrade. Summary, it's not much, but it's honest work. CIS, yeah. Wide variety of upgrades in terms of the gear they can bring. I mean, the BX droids having the shields and the swords and the mine and the sniper. The Magnas have 3 different upgrades alone, not to mention all their training slots and other things you can do with them. There's so many upgrades that you can justify on all of these units. One of my favorite things to do with commando droids is I will take 2 of them, I will give them shields and tac push, and then I will just use the AI to AI move them, pop tac push, get an aim, shoot, and then I probably take some wounds or something, and I'll use like Kalani's refresh card on them, and they get the shields back, they get tac push back, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. But there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with the droids because they just give you so many points to play with, and the same rules apply for these special forces units that cost a little bit more. It's like, hey, I actually have some points that I can put upgrades on these guys and do different things with them. So, not the same problem as Republic where you have to sit there and justify bringing them, and you definitely can't sit there and say, oh, I can't wait to put tac push on my ARC troopers. Probably not. But this case, you can actually play around with the different upgrades available to all of these units. Pretty much 2 units, so very little depth, which kind of sucks. This is probably the least in-depth category we've had to cover so far, but it's still 2 decent options. CIS can use these points for a lot of arguably better stuff is also my other complaint. I just don't ever really play commandos. I don't ever really justify bringing snipers. I'm usually just like, oh, well, I could also just have a tank, or I could just have Dooku, or Maul. And honestly, I think that's better a lot of times, but still cool units, and there is a lot of play. Like I said, with the points you have available to you in this faction, you can play around with these special forces options. Future, easily biggest concern out of all of these things. What the heck are you going to put as the 3rd special forces for the CIS? And listen, I'm the biggest Star Wars nerd out there. I could give you 6 different things right now. Let's just pretend those Geonosians coming out are going to be a special forces option for them. Whatever, I think that would be cool. But you could definitely do some different stuff. It's just we need to consider the fact if, things like Geonosians are going to be core troopers, Battle Force exclusive, things like that, or the CIS actually going to get more stuff in their faction. Because this is probably the least in-depth faction in terms of Star Wars lore, movies, cinema, all that stuff for people to really grasp and hang on to. However, it's probably one of my favorite factions, so I really do hope that they dig a little bit deeper in the lore and different units that maybe didn't see a ton of screen time or maybe people don't feel should be special forces to give this faction more options, because that's the best part about being a CIS player. You don't have to dig in that bag, but more importantly, you can actually bring good units to the table after you put your 6B1s down. So the more options, the better for this faction, and I do think that that would be nice to add another Special Forces option, which is a little bit obvious in saying, but nonetheless. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys enjoyed the report card. If you guys want to hear any type of specific video, I have tons lined up, but I do want to kind of finish up our report card video series before I worry about doing all this other stuff. I plan on sticking around and doing these videos for a while, so I want to make sure we aren't just rolling through things. I know there's a ton of new units coming out as I'm making these videos. My last section of this report card video will quite literally be everything I missed. So Ahsoka, Ewoks will probably be out by the time I finish this, something like that. But like Cody, Dark Troopers, don't worry, I will 100% cover that stuff, and then we'll probably even dive into things like upgrades. But you guys tell me what you want to hear. Tell me if you're liking the videos, tell me what you don't like, and I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one.